Hey guys, Paul here once again with VHScollector.com, your analog archivist, and today we are talking about Midnight Video. This is a very iconic label from 1983, has no connection to the bootleg label. So this company was actually a sub-label of Selectatape. But first let's look at these different releases that we have here. They released titles in clamshells, right? And of course, they released titles in these gorgeous big boxes, right? There's 8 movies altogether that were released by Midnight Video, and of those 8, 3 of them were released also in clamshells. Not really sure why. Some people think that these came out after the big boxes, but I'm not really sure. I don't really see any clue to that. So I think they might have came out simultaneously, and I try to look at the serial numbers on these to try to match them up and see. Speaking of which, let's talk about the serial numbers. So if you look on the back of some of these, they have a serial number there. So in the early 80s, there was this huge fear of piracy, and I guess these labels were a way to track all the different releases of these movies, or the different copies of these movies anyway. And they're also on the big boxes. As you can see here, I have a big box that also has them. But for a collector, part of the problem is that throughout the years that these things existed, a lot of people peeled off those serial numbers thinking they were just some sort of video store inventory system. But that's not true. I would say about half of my personal releases, and I have all of them, about half of them have the stickers and half of them don't, sadly. And I try to make sense of these serial numbers to see, like, maybe the clamshells had a different series of numbers, or I just couldn't make any sense of them. So my hunch with these movies is that they were released around the same time, maybe in the same month. The earliest mention I found in the trade magazines of Midnight Video was regarding their launch, and this was in January of 1983. They mentioned the line of Midnight Video being launched for that year by Selectatape. Now, who is Selectatape, right? So the earliest mention of Selectatape that I could find was 1979. And they began putting out pornography, of course, adult content, which was really popular at that time. And so I found the name of the president of this company. His name was Alan Roberts. Now, Alan Roberts has ties to adult films. He produced and directed some adult films. And so I wasn't sure if this was the same Alan Roberts, because that sounds like a pretty generic name. But I did a little bit of digging, and I realized, or I found out, that some of those Alan Roberts directed or produced movies were also released on video by Selectatape, so certainly it has to be the same guy. Unfortunately, he died in 2016, so we kind of missed the opportunity to actually question this guy about his home video companies for sure, which kind of sucks. But anyway, what he left us is this legacy of Midnight Video. These are probably the most known of any home video releases that he did release. But Selectatape did not only release pornography, but they also released some mainstream movies. For instance, It's a Wonderful Life. So there was a time period where a lot of people thought that movie was public domain, because I can't imagine this guy ever getting the license to this movie. But it just kind of shows the spectrum that they were dealing with. At first, this is all this pornography that surrounds Selectatape. And then there's It's a Wonderful Life, a family, the epitome of family cinema. So it's just interesting dichotomy, I guess. But at some point, he decided to do the Midnight Video line. We're going to delve into the different titles that we have here. So it looks like of the 8 movies that were released, was it 3 H.G. Lewis movies and 4 Andy Milligan movies, and of course, Microwave Massacre. So the first of these that we're going to look at is The Wizard of Gore. Now you could see, like I mentioned in a previous video, that they created new artwork for this movie. Now the original H.G. Lewis theatrical posters were kind of boring and tame. They weren't as interesting as the video store personnel would expect. So they commissioned a new artwork, and this is absolutely my favorite from all of these Midnight Video covers. The Man with Two Heads. This, I believe, this is an Andy Milligan movie, of course, right? And so you can see they have the original theatrical poster on here. And I guess that was sufficient. So a lot of the Andy Milligan posters have a little bit of gore on them, and so they decide to use those rather than commission new artwork. Now this looks like it might have been a thin box, but it has a really fat clamshell on here. So I'm not even sure if it's the original clamshell, but I did take it out and look at it. Well, actually, let's do that on camera now. So as you can see, this thing is really protruding. There's a fat clamshell in here, and at one point the seam had broken and someone taped it. Alright, let's open this up. Now the clamshell inside is in fact a big box clamshell, right? And we know that because it doesn't have any plastic sleeve on the outside for a paper insert, right? So, I don't know, maybe this is the original clamshell. It just seems to not fit too well inside this original big box. Alright, so then we also have another Andy Milligan film. The rats are coming, the werewolves are here. And so that, of course, is another poster art cover, right? I really don't know what else to say about these movies. We got Bloodthirsty Butchers, another Andy Milligan. Torture Dungeon. Here we have, well, I should mention specifically Bloodthirsty Butchers and Torture Dungeon. These are the two most rare and difficult ones to find, for sure. I mean, these were so hard for me to get at a decent price. I remember when I started collecting, this was a bit attainable. It was on the high end. This is probably the second most difficult of all these to find is this one, Bloodthirsty Butchers. It also has a really neat name. Torture Dungeon, by far, was always the hardest to find. And when it did pop up, I remember it just went for like 80, 100 bucks. And back in those days when I started collecting, that was a ton of money. Now, the movie sucks. It certainly does suck, but if you want to complete your midnight video collection, you have to have both of these, and these are just so rare. The clamshell of Bloodthirsty Butchers is a different matter. This is a little bit easier to get your hands on. Not really sure why. I guess they made more of the clamshells, because I do see these clamshells pop up quite often in comparison to the original big boxes. And here's a really famous release. Microwave Massacre. This is a big box. Looks like it might have been re-released because it is a fatter box. I'm not sure if there are thinner boxes of this. I believe there is because I did own another one of these years back and it was pretty beat up. I was able to replace it with this one. I sold the old one. I wish I would have kept it, but this looks like it was resealed. I never opened it up, but it certainly was used at one point, and it looks like they replaced the clamshell with a tray. This is the 6th video in this series, but whenever I do any research on Midnight Video, this always pops up, and this is a cool cover. It's, you know, I don't think it's as cool as the Wizard of Gore or Gore Girls, which we'll get to in a minute, but I think the name Microwave Massacre is just so absurd, and that artwork just goes along with it just perfectly. Alright, Gruesome Twosome, another H.G. Lewis movie, of course. This has some pretty good artwork. Now, most of my boxes have decent color to them, and they're not cut, thank goodness. That was always my two main rules in collecting big boxes, or any VHS really, was that it couldn't be cut. I would never have a cut box in my collection. I also would not have a box that was heavily faded, like where the entire cover art was like green or something. Some of these that I have are slightly faded. That's how I got them at the time. But it does seem like the ones that use the original poster art for these boxes the artwork looks a little faded. So I think that was just how they were manufactured at the time. And here's the last one, which is a very popular one as well. Gore Girls. Look at that cover art. You know, you might have seen this cover art floating around in some places. This is absolutely stunning. It just looks absolutely awesome. And of course, yeah, this is the last one. This is in a fat box. Let's open this up. I haven't opened this up in many years. Let's see what's in here. Let's see what kind of clamshell it has. Ah, there we go. Got the faux leather sort of clamshell. Now, there were some companies, some adult companies, that would actually release their movies in these fake leather-looking clamshells, and they would put the card in this little slot. So this is a case from the very early 80s, it looks like. It's a thinner clamshell, thinner than the other one that we looked at, the Man with Two Heads. This thing looks gorgeous. This is in like mint condition, actually. No stickers on the tape or anything, so this might not have been a rental. This might have been privately owned. It looks absolutely great. It's in incredible condition. The clamshell is not cracked, and that's the issue with a lot of these clamshells, that with age they crack so badly. Now in 1983, I did find another article from later in that year stating that a company called Goldfarb Distribution purchased the distribution rights of all 8 of these movies for $450,000 to be released internationally overseas. And so I looked on eBay recently, and there was a video released by Delta Video in Australia for Microwave Massacre, and it's a pretty cool release. So that's the only clamshell that I've seen for Microwave Massacre in another territory or in the United States, because I've only ever seen these 3 Midnight Video clamshells. I remember when I first got a clamshell, a Midnight Video clamshell, I think it was probably this one. I got it in the mail from Amazon, and that's where I got a lot of my great finds back in those days. And I was really disappointed. I'm like, oh man, a cut box. Because you were really rolling the dice when you would buy used video cassettes on Amazon. Sometimes you'd message the seller. Most of the time they wouldn't respond to you. Sometimes they would. You would just, and if they did respond, it was usually just like a copy and paste sort of response. But I always did my due diligence, but sometimes I wanted a video so bad that I would have just rolled the dice and hope for the best. So I got this in the mail. I remember it. I remember the day. This was many years ago. Just pulling this out of a bubble mailer and just thinking, damn, they sent me a cut box. Then I'm looking at it and I was like, this is not a cut box. I was so confused in those days. I was like, what is this? And so that's when I realized, they actually did release some clamshells. And these were the only 3 that they released in the US. Now, 2 of these were from my good friend, Steve, who used to own a video store called Pine Hollow Video. And he allowed me one day to go through all his videos, and he let me keep some of them. And so these were actually in there, and these actually completed my collection. But the most recent tape that I had bought was, of course, Torture Dungeon for many years. Like I said, I was trying to find this, and the time went by, and I just never found it, and I moved on to focusing on the website and all these things. But I had mentioned in a video that I wanted it, and I was looking for it. I needed it to complete my Midnight Video collection. And then out of the blue, one of you guys messaged me on Facebook or somewhere and said, hey, Paul, there's a cheap one on eBay right now for only $100. You should go snag it. And here it is. This was like a year or 2 ago, so, it's very recent that I was finally able to complete my Midnight Video collection. It's one of those collections that are very attainable because there's not a huge catalog of them. Kind of like Donna Michelle or Camp Video. These are labels that you can feasibly collect all of them. Now, of course, Midnight Video is a very iconic label. Just the skeleton and the top hat across the top is just absolutely cool. People are still trying to sell t-shirts with that image on it, or they are selling t-shirts with that image on it. It's just a well-known label, and I wish there was more information about the label. I haven't seen any promotional material for Midnight Video. There might have been some ad slicks or order sheets for Midnight Video, but I haven't seen any posters or anything like that, or any advertising for these types of movies, other than maybe a few reviews on the specific VHS releases back in the 80s. I've seen reviews for Wizard of Gore. I've seen a review for the Microwave Massacre Midnight Video release. I've seen that. There's just not a lot on this, but they're awesome and they're very memorable, and I'm quite happy to own them. So, this has been Paul with VHScollector.com. Say no to VHS grading. Thanks everybody who commented on my previous IGS video. There's more of that to come. If you guys have any clues or any information regarding these idiots grading videotapes, let me know. I might be beating a dead horse on this topic, but I will continue to beat a lot of dead horses because I am not giving up on this crusade. I am totally against grading, or grading a VHS anyway, and I will make that known. So, thanks again, guys. See you next time. Thanks for watching, guys. If you really enjoyed this video and would like to learn more about the home video industry, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know what you think, or if there's any other video ideas that you have, and hopefully I can do it. Have a good night, guys. Thanks again.